I always thought karma would handle my boss without my intervention. 3 years of degrading comments, stolen ideas, and public humiliations had taught me otherwise. As I stood in the elevator holding the USB drive with evidence that would destroy not just his career, but the carefully crafted lie he called his life, I realized revenge wasn't just a dish best served cold. It was a full-course meal I had been meticulously preparing since the day he first called me expendable in front of the entire board. My name is Daniel Wright, and this is how I systematically dismantled the empire of the most feared executive at Helix Dynamics, one calculated move at a time. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs during my interview. Vincent Blackwood sat across the polished mahogany table, his steel blue eyes evaluating me with the cold precision of someone appraising livestock. His reputation preceded him, the miracle worker who had transformed a failing tech company into a Fortune 500 contender in under 5 years. What the glowing press releases failed to mention was how many careers he'd crushed beneath his Italian leather shoes to get there. "Your resume is impressive, but can you handle pressure, Daniel?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "At Helix, we don't coddle our employees. We expect results, not excuses." I met his gaze with what I hoped was confident determination. "I thrive under pressure, Mr. Blackwood. My previous position at—" Yes, he interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Everyone claims to thrive under pressure until they're actually experiencing it. We'll see?" I should have walked away then, but the salary was double what I'd been making. And after my divorce had left me financially drained, I needed this position. Besides, how bad could it really be? The answer, as I would discover, was worse than anything I could have imagined. My first week started promisingly enough. My team seemed competent, the office was state-of-the-art, and the projects were challenging in all the right ways. By Wednesday, I had already identified several inefficiencies in the marketing strategy and drafted a proposal for improvements. I sent it to Vincent, hoping to make a strong first impression. Thursday morning, I walked into the weekly executive meeting to find Vincent presenting my ideas as his own. These innovative approaches should increase our digital engagement by at least 40% within the first quarter, he was saying, displaying slides that looked suspiciously like the ones I had created the night before. I sat frozen in my chair, uncertain of how to react. Lisa Chen, the CFO, nodded approvingly. "This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need, Vincent." When the meeting ended, I approached him privately. "Mr. Blackwood, I couldn't help but notice that the presentation you gave was very similar to the proposal I sent you yesterday." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Similar? I suppose great minds think alike, but let's be clear. Daniel, you've been here less than a week. Did you really think you had revolutionary ideas that hadn't occurred to someone who's been running this company for years? But the exact statistics and even the phrasing— Are you accusing me of something?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Because that would be an extraordinarily unwise move for someone still in their probationary period." I backed down. Of course, what choice did I have? But that night, I started keeping detailed records of everything I worked on, with timestamps and witnesses where possible. I didn't know what I would do with this information. I just knew I needed to protect myself. Over the next few months, a pattern emerged. Any idea that might make the company money or improve operations, Vincent claimed as his own. Any project that failed or missed targets somehow became my responsibility, regardless of my actual involvement. During meetings, he would ask me questions he knew I couldn't answer, deliberately setting me up to look incompetent in front of peers and subordinates. "Daniel, what's your projection for the Anderson account conversion?" he would ask, referencing clients I had never been briefed on. "I'm sorry, I haven't been involved with the Anderson account." I would respond, "Really? I specifically asked you to look into it last week. Are you saying you've done nothing on this critical account for 7 days?" His tone made it clear to everyone present that I was either lying or incompetent. The gaslighting was relentless. Meetings he had never scheduled became meetings I had missed. Deadlines he had never mentioned became deadlines I had forgotten. Instructions he had never given became instructions I had ignored. 6 months in, I was working 14-hour days, desperately trying to stay ahead of his manipulations while maintaining my actual responsibilities. My health was deteriorating. I'd lost weight, developed insomnia, and started experiencing panic attacks for the first time in my life. "You look terrible," remarked Samuel Kingston, the head of legal, one evening as we both worked late. Samuel was one of the few executives who seemed immune to Vincent's manipulations, perhaps because his value to the company was too great to risk antagonizing him. "Thanks," I replied dryly. "It's my new skincare routine, stress and sleep deprivation." Samuel chuckled, then grew serious. "Vincent's on a warpath about the Nakamura proposal. He's telling everyone you've botched it." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I submitted that proposal 3 days ago, and it was immaculate. I checked it a dozen times. Well, according to him, you sent an incomplete draft with misleading projections. The client is furious." I pulled up my sent emails and showed Samuel the proposal I had submitted. "Does this look incomplete to you?" He scanned it quickly. "No, it looks comprehensive. And these projections align with our financial models." "So what's he talking about?" Samuel's expression was grim. "My guess? He's setting you up to take a fall. The Nakamura deal is worth millions, but it's risky. If it succeeds, he'll take credit. If it fails, I'm the scapegoat," I finished. "You didn't hear it from me," Samuel said, standing to leave. "But if I were you, I'd start looking for an exit strategy. Vincent doesn't just push people out, he destroys them. Make sure they can't find comparable work elsewhere." I spent that night researching Vincent's career history. What I found disturbed me. Behind his rise to prominence was a trail of ruined careers. Former colleagues who had suddenly resigned due to personal reasons. Promising executives who had been fired for ethical violations that were never specified. Several had attempted legal action, only to withdraw their suits mysteriously. None had found positions at the same level again. Most had either downgraded significantly or left the industry entirely. The next day, I was called into Vincent's office. Lisa Chen was there, along with Rajiv Patel from HR. "Daniel," Vincent began, his tone falsely sympathetic. "We need to discuss your performance. For the next hour." I listened as he outlined a completely fabricated history of my failures at the company. According to his narrative, I had been given multiple warnings about substandard work, had missed crucial deadlines, and had now potentially cost the company the Nakamura deal with my negligence. When I tried to defend myself, he produced emails I had supposedly sent acknowledging these shortcomings and promising to improve. They were forgeries, of course, but convincing ones. "In light of these ongoing issues," Rajiv said, looking uncomfortable, "we're placing you on a performance improvement plan effective immediately. You'll have 30 days to demonstrate significant improvement, or we'll have to reconsider your position with the company." I knew what this meant. The PIP wasn't designed to help me improve. It was designed to create a paper trail justifying my termination. The goals would be impossible to achieve. The metrics subjective enough that Vincent could claim I had failed regardless of what I actually accomplished. As I left the office, I felt something break inside me, not my spirit, my restraint. I had played by the rules, worked within the system, tried to prove my worth through dedication and results. And where had it gotten me? On the verge of being fired. My professional reputation about to be destroyed by a sociopath in a tailored suit. No more. That night, I created a new email account under a pseudonym and contacted 5 former Helix employees who had left under suspicious circumstances during Vincent's tenure. My message was simple. I'm currently experiencing what you might have gone through. If you're willing to share your story, I'm willing to listen. By morning, I had 3 responses. By the end of the week, all 5 had agreed to meet with me. Their stories were eerily similar to mine. Vincent would target employees he saw as threats, usually those with innovative ideas or strong leadership potential. He would isolate them, undermine them, gaslight them, and eventually create circumstances that would justify their termination or force their resignation. In each case, he had ensured they couldn't easily find new positions by spreading rumors about their performance or ethics. He told potential employers I had leaked confidential information, said Grace Morris, formerly Helix's director of product development. It wasn't true, but the mere suggestion was enough to make me radioactive. I ended up moving across the country and switching industries just to find work. "Have you considered legal action?" I asked her. "We all have," replied Michael Turner, who had been head of operations. "But Vincent's smart. He never leaves a paper trail that would incriminate him, and Helix's legal team is formidable. Plus, he has dirt on everyone, or at least, he makes you think he does." "What do you mean?" Michael hesitated. "About 6 months before I was forced out, I caught a virus on my work computer. It fixed it, and I thought nothing more of it. But later, when I threatened to go to the board about Vincent's behavior, he showed me screenshots of my browser history, including some sites I had visited that, well, they weren't pornographic, but they were personal and potentially embarrassing. He implied he had more compromising information." "Spyware," I murmured. "He's monitoring employees' computers." "It would explain a lot," agreed Rebecca Winters, former chief marketing officer. "He always seemed to know things he shouldn't have known. Private conversations, personal problems employees were having." I left that meeting with a clearer understanding of what I was up against, and the beginning of a plan. If Vincent's power came from information, I needed better information. If he left no incriminating paper trail, I needed to create one. If he monitored employees' computers, I needed to be more careful than he was. I purchased a new laptop with cash and kept it at home, never connecting it to Helix's networks. I set up encrypted communication channels with the former employees who were willing to help me, and I began gathering evidence, not just of Vincent's mistreatment of me, but of potentially illegal activities within the company. Working on my PIP during the day, I spent my nights building my case. I discovered that Vincent had been manipulating financial reports to artificially inflate the company's performance, making his leadership appear more successful than it was. He had been pressuring the sales team to use deceptive practices to close deals, some of which likely violated consumer protection laws. And most damning of all, he had been using company resources to investigate competitors in ways that crossed ethical and legal boundaries. But I needed concrete proof, not just suspicions. And I needed to find a way to access it without alerting Vincent or triggering the spyware on my work computer. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Margaret Wu, Vincent's executive assistant, approached me in the break room one afternoon. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "Are you okay?" I asked her. She glanced around to ensure we were alone. "No," she admitted. "I'm not, but neither are you. From what I can see." "What do you mean?" "Vincent's PIP. It's a sham, and we both know it." She took a deep breath. "He's done this before. I've watched him do it to others. I've helped him do it. God forgive me." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I can't do it anymore." Her voice cracked slightly. "My mother raised me better than this. And what he asked me to do yesterday, it crossed a line." "What did he ask?" "He wants me to find inappropriate emails from you to a female colleague. Emails that don't exist. He says he needs them for when your PIP fails." She looked nauseated. "He's going to accuse you of sexual harassment. Daniel, that's how he plans to make sure you can't find work elsewhere." The cold calculation of it stunned me. "Why would you risk telling me this? He could fire you." "I'm quitting anyway. I've already found another job. My last day is Friday." She hesitated. "But before I go, I thought maybe I could help make things right. Somehow, an idea formed in my mind. Margaret, does Vincent ever leave his computer unlocked?" "Rarely, but he has a meeting with the board next Wednesday. He always gets nervous before board meetings and takes a long lunch by himself. Sometimes he forgets to lock his computer when he leaves." "And do you have access to his calendar, his emails?" "Yes, I manage both. Wait, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said carefully, "that we might have an opportunity to gather some evidence of what he's really been doing. Nothing illegal, just the truth." She considered this. "And what would you do with this evidence?" "Take it to the right people. People who can actually do something about Vincent." Margaret was silent for a long moment. "Next Wednesday," she finally said. "I'll text you if he leaves his computer unlocked, but Daniel, be careful. If he catches you..." I know, but I'm already on the chopping block. What's he going to do? Fire me twice? The next week was the longest of my life. I continued working on my impossible PIP goals, pretending I was still playing Vincent's game. I avoided using my work computer for anything personal and operated under the assumption that everything I did was being monitored. Wednesday arrived, and with it, Vincent's board meeting. I watched from my desk as he strode toward the elevator, briefcase in hand, exuding his usual confidence. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Lunchtime, office empty, door unlocked. My heart hammering in my chest. I made my way to Vincent's office. The executive floor was quiet. Most of the leadership team was either in the board meeting or at lunch. Margaret gave me a nervous nod as I passed her desk. Vincent's office was empty, as promised, his computer screen glowing with active applications. I sat at his desk and quickly began searching for evidence of his machinations. His email was a goldmine. I found correspondence with IT confirming the installation of monitoring software on select employees' computers, mine included. There were emails to various executives instructing them to exclude me from important meetings and withhold critical information, creating the conditions for me to fail. Most damning were his exchanges with HR, where he had systematically built a false narrative about my performance, often contradicting his own previous communications. I connected a tiny encrypted USB drive and began copying files as quickly as possible. Financial reports that didn't match the ones presented to the board, communications with competitors that bordered on collusion, a folder labeled Leverage, containing personal information on various executives and board members. What the hell do you think you're doing? I froze. Vincent stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. I asked you a question, Daniel. He stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. My mind raced. The USB drive was still copying files. I needed to stall him. I was looking for the Nakamura file, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Margaret said you wanted me to review the revised proposal before it went out. Bullshit. He moved toward the desk. Margaret's at lunch, and I can see what you're doing. The progress bar on the file transfer showed 89%. I needed just a few more seconds. You're right, I admitted, deciding to change tactics. I'm not here about Nakamura. I'm here because I know what you've been doing, Vincent, to me and to others before me. His expression shifted from anger to something more calculating. And what exactly do you think I've been doing? Systematically destroying careers, manipulating financial data, installing spyware on employees' computers? I gestured to his screen. It's all here. 97%. Those are serious accusations. Daniel, his tone was dangerous, but I could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Accusations without evidence. Accusations from an employee with performance issues who broke into his supervisor's office. Who do you think the board will believe? 100%. The file transfer completed. I discreetly removed the USB drive and slipped it into my pocket. I guess we'll find out, I said, standing up. Because unlike you, I keep records, and I'm not the only one you've wronged who's willing to come forward. For a moment, I thought he might physically attack me. His fists clenched and a vein pulsed in his forehead. But Vincent was nothing if not calculating. Get out of my office, he said quietly, and clear your desk. You're terminated, effective immediately. On what grounds? Unauthorized access to confidential company information. Security will escort you from the building. He reached for his phone. And Daniel, I'm going to make sure you never work in this industry again. I walked out with my head held high, even as security guards arrived to escort me from the premises. As we passed Margaret's desk, she gave me a subtle nod, which I returned. She had kept her end of the bargain. Now it was time for me to keep mine. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I met with an employment attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases. I organized the evidence I had gathered and collected sworn statements from former employees. I prepared a comprehensive report documenting Vincent's pattern of abusive behavior, financial manipulation, and potentially illegal activities. Then I waited for Vincent's counterattack. It came swiftly and brutally. First, He followed through on his threat to accuse me of sexual harassment. An HR representative called to inform me that evidence had been discovered of inappropriate communications I had sent to a female colleague. When I requested copies of these communications, I was told they were confidential, but had been thoroughly verified. Next, I began receiving calls from industry contacts warning me that Vincent was spreading rumors about me, claiming I had been fired for incompetence, dishonesty, and now sexual misconduct. Finally, I discovered that my home computer had been hacked. Files were missing or corrupted, including some of the evidence I had gathered against Vincent. Fortunately, I had already created multiple backups stored in secure locations. Vincent's message was clear: back down or be destroyed. I chose a third option. I sent my evidence package to 3 recipients simultaneously: the board of directors at Helix, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and a journalist at a respected business publication known for exposing corporate malfeasance. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The board called an emergency meeting. The SEC launched an investigation. The journalist contacted me for an interview, which I declined pending the outcome of the official investigations. Vincent was placed on administrative leave while the allegations were examined. But Vincent had allies on the board and resources at his disposal. He hired a high-powered legal team that began attacking the credibility of my evidence and my witnesses. Former employees who had agreed to testify suddenly went silent, presumably threatened or paid off. Technical experts questioned the authenticity of the electronic evidence I had provided. The battle threatened to become a protracted legal quagmire that could drag on for years, with no guarantee of justice at the end. I needed something more definitive, something even Vincent's lawyers couldn't explain away. That's when Samuel Kingston, still head of legal at Helix, contacted me privately. "I've been watching this situation unfold," he told me when we met at a quiet cafe far from the Helix offices. "And while I can't officially take sides, I think you should know something." "I'm listening." "Vincent keeps a private server," Samuel said, lowering his voice. "Not connected to Helix's networks. He uses it to store his most sensitive files, the ones he doesn't want IT or anyone else to access." "Where is the server?" "In his home office. But here's the interesting part. He accesses it remotely sometimes, through a VPN connection from his work computer. A connection that, theoretically, someone could trace if they had access to the Helix network logs." I understood what Samuel was suggesting. "And would these logs show what files he accessed?" "Not the contents, but the file names, yes. And sometimes file names can be revealing." "Why are you telling me this, Samuel? You work for Helix. For Vincent, essentially." He looked me straight in the eyes. "I work for the company, not for Vincent. And I believe in the law. What he's done to you and others, it isn't right. And from what I've seen in this investigation, it isn't legal either." Armed with this new information, I contacted a cybersecurity expert recommended by my attorney. Together, we were able to analyze the network logs Samuel had subtly made available to us. The file names Vincent had accessed were indeed revealing: board manipulation, strategy.doc, financial adjustments, Q3.XLSX, employee monitoring targets, PDF. But the most damning discovery was a folder simply named Insurance. Within it were hundreds of files, each named after a current or former Helix executive, board member, or high-level employee. My name was there. So were the names of everyone who had agreed to testify against Vincent and then mysteriously backed out. We couldn't access the contents of these files, but the implication was clear. Vincent kept compromising information on colleagues as insurance against exactly the kind of situation he now faced. This discovery transformed the case. The board could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. The SEC investigation intensified. The journalist published a preliminary article outlining the allegations against Vincent, careful to present them as unproven but serious enough to warrant public attention. Vincent's position became increasingly untenable. His allies on the board, concerned about their own exposure, began distancing themselves. His legal team, faced with evidence they couldn't easily dismiss, shifted from aggressive defense to damage control. 3 months after I had been escorted from the Helix building, I received a call from Rajiv Patel, the HR director. "The board would like to meet with you," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "They're prepared to discuss a settlement." The meeting was held at a neutral location, a conference room in my attorney's office building. 4 board members attended, including the chairperson, along with Helix's outside counsel. Vincent was notably absent. "Mr. Wright," began the chairperson, a distinguished older woman named Eleanor Richards. "First, let me express the board's regret for your experience at Helix. Our investigation has substantiated many of your allegations regarding Mr. Blackwood's behavior." My attorney nodded for me to respond. "I appreciate that acknowledgement, but regret doesn't undo the damage to my career or reputation, which is why we're here." Eleanor continued, "We're prepared to offer a significant financial settlement, along with a formal retraction of all negative statements made about your performance and character. Additionally, we will provide a positive reference for future employment opportunities." "And Vincent?" I asked, "what happens to him?" The board members exchanged glances. "Mr. Blackwood has resigned from his position, effective immediately," Eleanor stated. "The terms of his separation are confidential, but I can assure you he will no longer be in a position to harm you or other Helix employees. It was a victory, of sorts. Vincent would be gone from Helix, and my reputation would be restored. But the settlement would also require my silence, no further pursuit of legal action, no public statements about Vincent or Helix, no cooperation with ongoing investigations. I need time to consider your offer," I told them. That night, I called a meeting with the former employees who had been willing to stand with me against Vincent. We gathered in my apartment, reviewing the terms of the proposed settlement. "It's a good offer," said Rebecca Winters. "Better than any of us got when we left. But it lets Vincent walk away," I pointed out, "probably with a golden parachute, and it does nothing for all the others he's hurt who aren't part of this case." "What's the alternative?" asked Michael Turner. "Keep fighting? The legal battle could take years, with no guarantee of a better outcome." "There's another option," I said slowly. "We reject the settlement. We go public with everything we know, not just through one journalist, but through social media, industry forums, anywhere people will listen. We make it impossible for Vincent to simply move to another company and start the cycle again." "That's risky," Grace Morris warned. "Vincent still has powerful friends, and Helix's lawyers would come after us for defamation. Not if what we say is true, and we have the evidence to prove it is." The discussion continued late into the night. By morning, we had reached a consensus. We would reject the settlement and take our story public, not just about Vincent, but about the corporate culture that had enabled him for years. The impact was greater than any of us had anticipated. Our collective testimony, backed by documented evidence, sparked not just media interest, but a broader conversation about toxic leadership and corporate accountability. Other former Helix employees, seeing that they were not alone, came forward with their own stories. Current employees began questioning practices they had previously accepted as normal. Helix's stock price took a hit. Major clients expressed concern. The SEC investigation expanded to include other executives who had been complicit in Vincent's schemes. 3 weeks after we went public, I received another call from Eleanor Richards. "The board would like to meet again," she said, her tone considerably less confident than before. "We have a new proposal to discuss." The second offer was radically different from the first. In addition to a larger financial settlement, Helix agreed to a series of binding commitments: an independent review of all executive hiring and evaluation practices, the establishment of an anonymous whistleblower system with direct access to the board, mandatory leadership training for all managers, and a zero-tolerance policy for the kind of behavior Vincent had exhibited. Most significantly, they agreed to cooperate fully with all regulatory investigations and to release me and other former employees from any confidentiality obligations regarding Vincent's conduct. "Why the change of heart?" I asked Eleanor directly. "Because you were right," she admitted. "The problem wasn't just Vincent. It was a system that allowed someone like him to thrive. And if we don't fix that system, we'll eventually find ourselves right back here with a different Vincent." I accepted the new offer, as did the others. It wasn't about the money. It was about ensuring that what had happened to us wouldn't happen to others. Vincent Blackwood did not fare as well. The SEC investigation resulted in civil penalties for securities fraud. Several former employees filed successful lawsuits for wrongful termination and hostile work environment. His reputation in the industry was irreparably damaged. The last I heard, he had moved abroad, attempting to rebuild his career in a country where his history was less well known. But the internet has a long memory, and Vincent's past continued to follow him. As for me, I didn't return to Helix. Instead, I used part of my settlement to start a consulting firm specializing in corporate culture and ethical leadership. Many of my clients were companies trying to recover from their own Vincent Blackwoods. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I reflected on the journey from that first day in Vincent's office to the final resolution. I had lost a job, but found a purpose. I had experienced the worst of corporate America, but helped create something better in its wake. The revenge I had sought wasn't just about making Vincent pay for what he had done to me. It was about changing the conditions that had allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. It was about creating consequences for actions that had previously gone unpunished. And in that, I had succeeded beyond my expectations. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into the lobby of what had once been my professional prison. I was there for a meeting with Helix's new CEO, a former operations director known for her integrity and employee-centered leadership approach. She wanted my input on some changes they were implementing based on the recommendations from the independent review. As I waited for the receptionist to announce my arrival, I caught sight of the company's new mission statement displayed prominently on the wall. Among the core values listed was fostering an environment of respect, transparency, and accountability at all levels of leadership. I smiled to myself. Vincent would have hated it. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, who had recently been hired to lead Helix's newly formed ethics department. "Meeting still on?" I texted back, "Just arrived. See you upstairs." The receptionist looked up. "Mr. Wright, they're ready for you now." I nodded my thanks and headed back to the elevators, no longer carrying the weight of resentment and fear that had once accompanied me on this same journey. The best revenge I had discovered wasn't destroying Vincent Blackwood. It was building something better from the ruins he had left behind. And as the elevator ascended toward a company transformed, I realized that sometimes justice doesn't arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes it takes detours and unexpected paths. But when it finally comes, when the truth finally prevails, it brings with it not just satisfaction, but the opportunity for genuine healing and change. The doors opened on a floor I knew well, but the atmosphere was different now, lighter, more open. People smiled as I passed, some recognizing me from the news coverage or industry events where I had spoken about my experience. I had entered Helix 3 years ago as just another ambitious professional seeking success. I was returning now as something else entirely, a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked, but also a testament to the possibility of redemption and renewal. Not just for a company, but for all of us who had found the courage to stand up and say, "Enough." I knocked on the conference room door, took a deep breath, and stepped forward into a future I had helped create, one small act of resistance at a time.